Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. There may be some people still trickling in. Just to kind of introduce everybody to get started and see a lot of familiar faces. I'm Kyle Burris, the coordinator of the Teaching and Learning Center. We actually have two presenters today. The first is Honey Aho. She's a current RN student in our program here. And then we have Sherry Harshaw is one of our English and reading instructors on. So they're going to kind of have split duty. Honey will lead off with covering some of the math, and then Sherry will cover some of the reading. So we were talking a little bit earlier, there's a couple of students maybe in here that are OTA or Surge Tech. Those programs do also have the science and the language sections of the test for their programs. Nursing is just reading and math. So the focus of this workshop is just on those two tests that are in common with all programs. I'll show a little bit more later some additional resources that you can access with regard to tutoring and other things like that. So probably in between speakers will show you a couple of things related to that. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Honey. If you're joining us online, if you do have a question, feel free to jump in anytime. Just make sure that you're unmuted on your end. Or you can type in the chat as well. And I'll try to keep an eye on that and come up with questions. I'll turn it over to Honey.
All right, like you said, my name is Honey Aho. Yeah, that's my real name. And I'm a student, a baby nurse student in the nursing program. And so, welcome and thanks for coming. Let's see, this thing is working now.
There you go. Do it on my end. There you go.
So there is 36 questions with 54 minutes, which makes it 1.5 minutes per question. And then where it says no calculator allowed, we actually verified that there's a calculator embedded in the test that you'll be able to use. Now, I don't know that you can access it on all problems, but on some of the problems are, I seem to remember that you use it, but make sure you know it before and don't necessarily rely on the calculator. But I believe it's there. According to Wendy, it is embedded in the actual test itself. So this is about getting into nursing school. And so yes, the TEAS test is a pretty heavy determiner for whether you can get in or not. And I can say that from I have a fellow classmate who actually got an 86 on this test, and she did not have AP yet, which is a requirement that you have to have prior to coming in. It's all on a point system, and the top 48 students get come in. So when I applied, there was close to 200, I think, somewhere around there, and they took 48 of us. And so I know that she got in, and she had a very high ATI score. So it is important, but it's not the only thing that determines, but you do have to pass it to get in. So here's some study sources for math, and they'll kind of go hand in hand with Sherry. I'll let Sherry go in more detail about study tips and stuff like that. She's very good at that. But I'm going to tell you, I use a resource called Union Test Prep online. You can do all 4 subjects for ATI on there, I know that, but for math, you can pick just math, you can pick just reading, and you can go through and there's like, I don't know, 100 questions or so, and you can do them and they explain them to you. I highly recommend if you're going through and you're studying and you are stumped, go to Khan Academy. Khan Academy is a huge resource for math. They have so much on there now. Khan Academy was primarily, it started with math, but now there's chemistry, there's nursing, there's lots of stuff on there. So that's a great resource, a great tool. You can actually app it, so you can have it on your phone and watch the videos on your phone. So if you're studying and you come to a question, you're like, I don't get how to do this. They'll walk you through step by step how to do it. So that's a great resource tool for helping you learn. These are some basic study tips. I'm going to tell you that you want to know your basic math things. You want to know and remember how to do long division. Remember how to do it, and hope that there's a calculator. If there is, then you don't have to worry about having to do long division. But if there's not, make sure you know how to do that on paper and understanding that, and kind of refresh your memory on some of those things that you used to use that we don't use much anymore because we just frankly don't have to. So that's important. And a lot of this other stuff, I'm going to let Sherry go over it, but I'm going to tell you, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to feel coming in. And when you sit down and take that test, take a deep breath. In fact, I was told that the best thing to do is yawn. It calms you down. I'll let you know how that works tomorrow because I have a huge test. So first I'm going to start with order of operation because this is absolutely key to doing math. There is a way to do an operation when you're doing math problems, however they're set up. When you have parentheses, you always do your parentheses first. Whatever is in your parentheses, do it first. And then you're going to do multiplication or division in your parentheses, adding and subtracting in your parentheses, and then going outside. So if you see, the first thing you're going to do is multiply these two numbers, then add it to this number, then you're going to divide, and then you're going to subtract, which gives you 0. That's pretty basic and self-explanatory a little bit, but just make sure you know that because that's key. If you do that problem in a different order, you're going to get a different answer, and it's going to be on the test. And you're going to think you got it, but you didn't. So percentages. Usually I spend a lot more time trying to cut this down, but anyways, percentages I think are a hang up for us. A lot of times we are like, percentages they seem to trip us up. And really in the simplest term, a percentage is just part of 100. And so if we're going to write 99.7 as a decimal, and remembering that it's part of 100, you would write it 0.997 as a decimal. Why do you do this? You divide that number, you take that decimal out of there, you divide that number, and you get this. So you divide it by 100 because that's what a percentage is. It's part of 100. So that's how that works. You can set that problem up on a calculator on your paper, and you divide it, and you get 0.997 by dividing by 100. Decimal to percent. Say you're going to do the opposite. You have a decimal here, 0.9889 times 100, which would give you 89, and then you just add the percent sign. That's how you do decimals to percentages. Now down below is a problem that it's in your book, and it's the third one in your book, in this book right here, if you have this book. And the reason I picked this one out is because it's a little bit interesting. So here, which fraction is equivalent to 83.1%? You would first do this by dividing, and you would get 0.831. So why I picked this one is because 0.831, you might go, well, what is that? That's this, right? But the interesting thing here is it says fraction. So you're looking for a fraction. And 0.831, remember in numbering and number systems, you have tens, hundreds, thousands. So it's going to actually be A, and it goes over the thousands because that's the last placement number after your decimal. So that's why that one is in there, and it explains it in your book. I just wanted to point that one out to you because I didn't want you just to think decimals and you just do the simple thing and get that, but you got to pay attention to what the problem is asking. So this is again percentages, and so the calculator, if it said what percentage of 250 is 10, this would be set up like this on your calculator. But your brainwave, and I told this in every one so far, I like to do things in tens. For some reason, tens work well for me. And maybe it's because as a little kid, they used to teach us 3 and 7, 6 and 4, and we kind of always learn that. And in rounding, we use tens. So I like to think in tens. So if I was going to do this and I didn't have a calculator, this is how my brain works. What is 10% of 250? Well, I know 10% of 250 is dropping that 0, which is 25. So if 10% of 250 is 25, then I can easily say to myself, well, what is half of 10? It's 5, and so 5% would be 12.5. So that's just half of 25. So I can look at a multiple choice question, and I can know that whatever gets me there, that 10 is less than 12.5, so I know it's less than 5%. So most likely you're going to have options like that, and that's how you get 4. Now, if you did it on the calculator, easy cheesy. That's how you set it up. 10 divided by 250. That's what that question is asking. The next question says, what is 0.04% of 650? Now, remember when you're dealing with decimals and that this percent, it really is just saying this. And so you would then multiply. You would get 25.5556, and you would round and it'd be 26. Unless they give you 25.556, but on the calculator, you would set it up just like that. That makes sense? So here's a few practice. Oh, wait a minute. I have something for you. This is my cheat sheet. This will help you. You can use it. You can throw it away. It's good. You can use it if you want to, and you know how to do percentages. Don't bother. But this is just an easy way. If you see, they'll give you every different example of how to do percents. Whether it's asking you percent of this or percent of that, you can set it up in this way, and you'll get the answer. So if you have a problem with percentages, memorize this little trick. Whether or not there's a calculator, you'll know how to do when it's asking you what percent of what is what, or how do you find out the percent of this. You can set it up in this little cheat sheet. No, and I did not come up with that. I found it online. So here's some problems. A woman wants to buy a dress, and it's going to say she only has $25. And the dress she wants is $30, but it's 25% off. Can she buy this dress? These are the type of problems you're probably going to see. So if I did this with my brain, and I said, well, if the dress is $30, and I said 10% of 30, off of that would be $3, right? So I'm going to go 20 is going to be $6. Half of 3%, or half of 10% is $5, so that's 25%. 25, so 5, I'm going to take that 5, half of 3 is $1.50. So 25% off of 30 is $7.50. Does that make sense how I did that with my brain with using just tens and then 5? So I took 2 10% and 1 5% and came up with $7.50. So if I subtract $7.50 from $30, my price is $22.50, right? So can she buy that dress? Yes. And what about sales tax? If I put sales tax back onto that, and the sales tax is tacked onto the $22.50, can she still buy that dress? Well, I'm going to do it backwards. $22.50. If it's 10%, it's going to be $2.50 added tax, which would be $25. It's only 8%, so it's going to be less than that, which is actually $1.80. And so yes, you can still buy the dress. See how I just use tens, going back one way to the other way. If I go too fast and I'm not making sense, let me know. So the total revenue was $200,000 for the company. The following year it went up 15%. How much was the total revenue the next year? So if I use 10% of 200,000 is 20. So 5 more would be 10. So the revenue went up 30,000 the following year. And you could set that up in your calculator just by doing that. You could use that cheat sheet, and you also can set it up in your calculator just by taking the percentage and multiplying. So here's a question. This one was, I found this one online. In a sale, all prices are reduced by 40%. Calculate the original price of the article whose sale price is 42. And so your immediate reaction is to think that you're going to multiply this 40% by that 42, but you're really not. So think about what that question's asking you. The original price, remember percentages are 100, part of 100. So what's the missing percent that's missing? It's 60. So find the original price. You'd have to work that problem using 60 in order to find the original price, and calculating the original price of this article. The sale price is 42, and if I say that the original price is actually going to be 70, because I have to use 60 as the thing, it's actually marked 40% off, and so, but it's 60% that would be. Does that make sense? Or did I lose you? kind of a, I found that one online and I thought, well, that's a little bit tricky. They make it look like you're reducing the price by 40%, but in order to reduce the price by 40%, you have to know adding the 60% back in. So here is fractions to decimals. Look, I tricked it. Got it underneath it. Which of these express 33 over 80 as a decimal? This is not complex. You're just going to divide your numerator by your denominator, and that's going to give you that percentage. And that's really how simplistic it is. So I did these ones last night, and my little girl actually was sitting next to me doing it with me. So you just take your 33 divided by 88, or 80, sorry, 33 divided by 80, and you would get 0.1. The A is your answer, 0.1425. 0.1. All right, solving equations with variables. Variables are just a number, an unknown number represented by either a letter, it could be a symbol, but most often it's a letter. So just to refresh your memory, you're trying to get your x onto one side in order to know what x is, the value of x. So whatever you do to one side, you do it to the other side. So this problem would look like we're going to, and why in math we always want to get it to the left side, I don't know, but we generally always want to get our letters on the left side. So that's just a note for kind of remember. So you're just going to subtract 2x from 3x, and you're going to end up with x plus 5 equals 1. Then you're going to have to get rid of that 5 by doing this same to both sides. So you're going to go negative minus 5, which ends up giving us negative 4. So that's kind of a fast one. But I got this tricky one. And so, again, I tried to trick it right here. So, see, you can't really put fractions on computers. So I'm trying to trick it and make it look like they're fractions. So here's one that was online with variables. And so you might look at this and you might go, well, that's easy. And you might say right away, well, b equals 36. Right? You just look at that and you're like, cross multiply, or even if I got rid of them, I'm going to end up with b equals 36. But what they have you do here is actually cross multiply. And when you multiply those two variables by each other, they become squared. And this is where you got to remember, when you have a squared letter here, this, in order to get rid of this square, this is a square here. You would have to square both of these numbers to get rid of that square, which would then be that your number b would actually equal 6. So know that they're probably going to throw those at you, and they're going to give you the basic concept in here about working with variables and fractions. But you might see something like this. So remember, if you have a squared variable over here, you have to square both of those numbers to get rid of that square. So when I see now, and I thought, oh, that's probably a good tip to point out. I'm not going to spend much time here. I just want to point out that you want to because we all kind of know how to order numbers, and so just remember to look for keywords: decrease, increase. So you pick the right order, because both of those orders are on here, increasing and decreasing. So just make sure that you pay attention to words when you number, and be cautious about your negatives, because negative 0.2 is definitely less than just negative 2. Because negative 0.2 is not a whole number; it's part of a number. So it is definitely a lot less than negative 2. Fractions. We know this, and just refreshing your memory. When you're multiplying, or when you're adding and subtracting fractions, you have to have the same denominator. You have to have the same denominator, which is the bottom number of your fraction. And as you can see, these look like they're dividing, but they're just fractions in the way the computer writes them. So the first one, obviously, you're going to look at 12 and 3, and you know that 3 is a factor of 12, so we're going to go with 12 as our denominator, and then you add across. That's how that works. And then you would reduce if you had to reduce, and that's important to remember when adding and subtracting. Same denominator. but not true with multiplication and division. Multiplying, you can go just multiply right across. But division, you have to reciprocate your second number right here, flip this over, and then multiply. So, adding and subtracting, same denominator. In order to add those, subtract them, same denominator. To multiply or divide, just go straight across, except for dividing, flip the second number. It's called reciprocal. And that's, I'm just trying to give you an overview of things you want to be privy to that you want to know. So, rates and ratios. Ratios are simply comparing two numbers. I have 50 apples and 40 oranges. That's 50 to 40. Now, if I was asked what percentage of apples do I have of the total, well, we have to remember total apples is 90, and so I would have to take what is the percent of, what percent is 50 of 90, and if you use your cheat sheet, you could figure this out by putting those numbers, by looking at the way it's worded, and you would figure it out, and if you use your calculator, you would set it up like this, and it's 56%. You're going to see percentages like crazy. So make sure you know them, because they're in your real world problems. And so rate of change. If John can travel 150 miles in 2 hours, how far will he go in 7 hours at the same rate of speed? Well, if he's traveling 150 miles in 2 hours, and I got to figure out what he traveled in 1 hour. So I'm just going to simply divide that number by 2, and I know that he's traveling at 75 miles per hour. He's making 75 miles in an hour. And how long will he go? I'm just going to simply multiply 7 times 75, which is 525 miles. The second one is a ratio and then a percentage. Nursing class is 6 males and 42 females. I meant to change that because my class right now has 4 males and 40, well, we just dropped, one just dropped, so now, but we did have 4 males and 44 females, so there's 48 of us, and so it's pretty close. And then, so anyways, it just says, what is the male to female ratio? So you could say it's 6 to 42, or you could say it's 1 to 7, because for every 1 male, there's 7 females. And so you could say it either way. Either way would be correct, because you're just comparing the two numbers. But when we're asked how many males represent the percentage of the class, I have to take the full number, which is 48, and that makes 48, 6 divided by 48 would equal 12.5% of my class. And as you can see down here, it's written as a decimal and then converted to a percentage by multiplying that times 100. And then that gives me my percent. So the next one says if 42.8 kilograms is divided into 2 parts in a ratio of 7 to 2, how many kilograms is in a smaller share? So how would you figure this one out? If it's divided into 2 parts in the ratio of 7.7 to 2, how many kilograms is in a smaller share? Well, there's some useless information in this thing, but the bottom line is, how many shares do I have? I have 9, complete, because I'm 7 to 2. So I can take this number and I can divide this number by 9, and I would end up with the correct answer. And I wrote this down. I had it somewhere, but I don't see it on there. So if I divide that number, 42.8, divide by 9, and I get 4.75, and I want to know what those 2 shares are. I'm going to times that by 2, and I know it's 9.51. So I just want to know what the smaller share is. So I got to divide the number by the total amount of shares, and I just want to know what this one is. So that one is going to be 2 shares of whatever this whole share is, which ends up being this by multiplying it by 2. So that's what a ratio might look like in your problem. This problem was taken right off of a TEAS prep thing, so you can that's might be something that you'd see. So remember, ratios are comparing 2 numbers, but it's a whole. So just like the 50 apples to 40 oranges, the whole fruit is 90. So just keep those things in mind. Ratio is just comparing two things, but it's comparing two things of a whole. I took out the sentencing. I just want to point out these are key phrases that you would want to just be privy to, that you would know when talking about adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, because when you do phrases through expressions, they're going to give it to you in words, so it's key to know. You can take a picture, and we could probably give you this PowerPoint, can we? We can give you the PowerPoint too. So those are key terms you want to know, because when they put them into a sentence, they want you to be able to pick out those words and put them back into a number sentence. So you're going to get a word sentence, and you're going to put it into a number sentence, and that's the answer you're looking for. They're not looking for you to solve it necessarily. They're looking for that you can take information in words about numbers and put it into a number sentence. And so these are just key numbers, sentence words that you would see in a phrase that you would turn into an expression. Okay, so understanding graphs and data. This is a picture of a graph that you might see, and some data, and these are some of the questions that might follow that graph. And to be honest with you, this is going to be probably what science looks like a lot too, is understanding that kind of stuff. And so if we went through and answered these, which we could, you're just looking at the information. So if Joanne buys her groceries from Daisy Hill during the sale, how much will she pay for all her purchases? And so there's Daisy Hill's groceries list, and if she went and bought one loaf of bread, and it's just taking that information and putting it back onto here. And that's what they want you to know. They want you to know how to read that and take that. There's an example in your book, which I had up here, which our English teacher pointed out to us very clearly, that the graph has to have a title, and that's in here. And you want to look at that, because that might be what it is too. It might not be that they want you to look at, be able to understand what the graph is talking about. And this is kind of a simple one, and I just put it up there just trying to show you what information they're looking for. And like I said, there's one in here that talks about, and you're going to have this in correlation to like looking at a graph and how do they work with one another. You're going to see graphs there probably too. But so we could work through some of these. We can just look at them, and you can see it's kind of basic, and I think that's really more what they're looking for based on what I see in the book. And then, like I said, the one problem in your book, you're going to look at it and go, well, what is missing? And good thing with the things in there, because it tells you that every graph needs a title. And it, like Sherry pointed out, it should be a reading question more than a math question, but it is in the math section. So know that you can look at something like this and take the information from that graph and apply it to the questions below. Okay, so here's a problem with data. This is a data question. These are in here. Below are numbers of caramel clusters in a small bag of each brand of trail mix at DJ's grocery store. The mean is 4. What is the missing number? Well, what does a mean? And so a mean is kind of another way to say average, I think. And so what you would have to do is you would add these numbers together, and you would see that I think they equal 21. They equal 21, but the mean, or the average of 6 numbers, is 4. So this is a basic one, so it's easier to do, because we can say, well, what is the average of 6 divided by 6 times something that, what we know 4, multiples of 4. And so I know right away the missing number is going to be 3, because 24, if I take 24 divided by 6, I'm going to get 4 as my average. Because if all my 6 numbers equals 24, and I divide it by the amount of numbers I have, that's my mean, which is 4. But this is data interpreting. So they want you to kind of look at that. And then this one is, this is different. This is the median. So make sure you know those 2 different terms. Means is like your average. It's taking all of your numbers, adding together, and dividing them by the amount of numbers or the amount of parts you have. The median is actually asking you exactly that. What's the median? What's the middle? So you would order these in order from least to greatest or greatest to least, and you would take the middle number. If it's two of the middle, if you have this one's easy because there's only 5, but let's say you had 6 numbers, you would take those 2 middle numbers and you would take the average of those 2 middle numbers. And the answer should be somewhere in they're multiple choice, so it's not like you're left out in the dark, and it should be there. And you're going to see one that's going to be like 204, 203, 200, and if you take those the 2 middle numbers, it's the middle of those. That's really what it is. So that's this table here. What is the mean? What is the median? Median here is 152, and it's easy to see. And of course, I use the easy ones because it's easy for me to explain, because obviously I get nervous up here too, so it's easy for me to say. Here's relationships between variables. So this is a relationship between 2 numbers. What's happening with those 2 numbers? If one goes up, does the other go down? Or if one goes up, does the other one go up? Or does they both go down? And that's what relationships and between variables are talking about. So if you see, I only listen to the radio when I drive my car, and when I I listen to the radio. As the miles increase, so does my minutes on listening to the radio. So the relationship between these are 2 positive relationships. As I drive more miles, I get more radio minutes. But here in the Dow, the inverse, this is the inverse relationship, and so when one goes up, the other goes down. So when the price of oil goes up, the Dow goes down. And you'll find an interesting one in your book that says which I have no idea how it correlates, but when mini skirts get shorter, stocks go high, get better. So, I don't know. It's in your book, but it's a correlation, and it's something that they look at. What's the relationship between them? And here is a great example of the amount of studying for your TEAS impacts your score. So what is the independent and dependent variable? Well, what's the dependent variable? I like to think of this. The dependent variable is your score based on the amount that you study, right? So your score is going to depend on the amount you study. So that's how you can kind of remember what are independent, what's dependent. Your kid is your dependent and trains you if you have a kid. So that's a good way to remember, like the amount I study is going to impact my score. So my score depends on the amount I study. All right, measurement areas and parameters. So the area is the whole thing, every bit of this. The area is all of us. The perimeter is the outer edge. So make sure you know basic, those kind of things, and you want to make sure that you know some basic formulas. Square, length times length to find area, or length times height is a rectangle. But triangles, remember, when we're going to figure out the area of a triangle, it's like a half of a rectangle, or half of a square. So it's base times height divided by 2. And those are all in your book. And you want to kind of refresh your memory on how to do those to figure out area. So on this problem, you're simply going to, even though it looks complex, you're going to just figure out your whole area, which is 4 times 4, which is 16. And then I'm going to figure out my triangle, the whited out area. So 2 times 2 is 4, but it's only half of that, so it's actually 2. So I'm going to take 16 minus 2 makes 14. And that's what they're asking you on that one. And this is directly out of your book. Now here, I'm going to add all of these to find out what my perimeter is. So they don't give me this one, and they don't give me this one. But I got to take what I know. And if I said I drew a line right here, I know this one's going to be 4 also. And so that's how simple it is. Just use the information that you have. If I drew a line here, I know that this is 3, this much, but this is 5, so my leftover is 2. So that's how I'm going to put a 2 here, and I'm going to put an 8 here. So then I'm just going to add them all, and that's my perimeter. So your perimeter is your outer edge, your area is everybody inside. And those are all in your book. And the only one that I would make sure that you kind of go over and just give you a thing is number in circles, because you do use pi in order to figure out a circumference of a circle, or the area. But just to give you a refresher, a diameter is the complete width of the circle, and half of that is your radius. So a square, you might just see this without a picture of a square, just picture in your head. A side of a square is 2.5 centimeters long. What is the area? So what would I do? 2.5 times 2.5. And so we could figure that one out if you want to, but for yourself, or you can use your calculator. 2.5 times 2.5. 6.25. So it's A. Or you can multiply it in when you're multiplying decimals, you want to just count your decimal spaces, multiply like normal numbers, count your decimal spaces, and then put that back in your number. So if I went 25 times 25, I would get 625, and then I would just count my decimals, and I have two of them, two spaces, because I have one here, one in the upper number, and that's how you do that. That's how you do that on paper. So I didn't see a ton of that in here, so I took it off. I did have a slide for that. All right, so metric conversions. King Henry died unusually drinking chocolate milk. I'm going to tell you, if you're going into nursing, memorize this. Know this, because you're going to use it, and you're going to use it right away. So the way this works is, here's your basic unit, meters, liters, grams. When we go this way, even though it's getting smaller, interestingly, we multiply. But when we go this way, when our units are getting bigger, we would divide. And so, because it's just saying you have this liter, and so it's saying, well, how many of these bigger kiloliters can fit into this liter, and that's why that number, we divide that number. And so it's just by 10. So if I was going to go grams to decagrams, I would multiply by 10. If I was going grams to centigrams, I would multiply by 10, or by 10 times 10, which is 100. And that's how that thing works. And that's important to know, because you're going to see those, and you're certainly going to see it in nursing. And so this is just a mnemonic to help you memorize. King Henry died unusually drinking chocolate milk. So milliliters to meters and back and forth. To be able to do those, like I said, if you're going that way, you're dividing. If you're coming this way, you're multiplying, and your decimal point just moves over the spaces. And here would be an example. Express 48 square inches. I pulled this one because I wanted to make you aware of what it's saying here. Express 48 square centimeters in square meters. So if I go back here and I look at centimeters, and it wants to know meters, what am I going to do? I'm going to divide. But I have to remember that it says squared. And so that number, it's very kind of tricky, because this problem threw me. At first I looked at it and I thought I just did the easy thing, and then I was like, no, it actually says square meters. So the square meters is actually going to be 1,000, and that's why that answer then becomes 0.0048. So not just 0.048, it's 0048, because it's squared meters. So that's kind of a tricky thing that it says, but the problem, I actually answered this problem and I answered it wrong, and I was like, what? And so then I had to read the terminology, and that was what I missed too, that it said squared. And so when it's squared, it's like 10 times 10. And so then, or 10 times, it ends up being you divide by 1,000. So here's your practice conversion problems in your thing. And I just want to point out to you something here. If you see this CC, like here on this problem, CC is just the same as interchangeable with milliliters. So don't let that throw you for a loop. If you see that anywhere, CCs is what they use for measuring. They used to use it for measuring in nursing for medication, and now they're getting away from that. So that's what that is referring to. And I put that up there to kind of reference you to that. And then Fahrenheit to Celsius, there is a mathematical way to convert that. It's 9/5 and 5/9 for Fahrenheit, but I don't believe that they do have any of those. They're just wanting you to be able to correlate how they convert. And then here, 0 point, you got kilograms, pounds to kilograms here, 2 kilograms. It's hard to see, but 2 kilograms is 4.4 pounds because 2.2 pounds is 1 kilogram. And you'll use that in nursing also. But that's just kind of what I just wanted to point that out to you about, mostly about the CCs, because I was like, no one really used that except for in nursing. And so if you've seen that, you'd be like, what? And that's really what it's just correlating with milliliters. And those are in your book.
Milliliters or millimeters?
Milliliters. Yeah, CCs are milliliters. So like if you were doing this problem in your book, and it gives you the explanation, which is good, but that's really what that is. And we could work through these, but I hate to work through them when they're in your book and you could practice them and look at the rationale. I just put them up there because I wanted to point out that about CCs, because that's not like a normal conversion that you would use a whole lot outside of nursing, and now we're getting away from it anyway. So, do you have any questions for me? Last time, a girl had a great question. She had a percentage question about, like, if you notice, like, I don't know if any of your guys' classes do this, but our nursing courses do this, like my exams are worth 90% of my grade. And so if you watch some teachers set up your grade book and it has like your quizzes are worth 15% and your exams are worth 50% and your homework's worth 28%. And I mean, it should add up to 100%. And she had that problem, and that's a great problem for percentages. And so I tried to find it and type it out, and I couldn't find the exact one. But so if I was going to do that percentage problem, I would just take my average of whatever is in for like if it's test, okay, like if my test and I got an 84 and then a 94 and then an 83, I would add those together and then divide it by 3 and take an average. And now let's say it's 50% of my grades, and I'm going to multiply that by 0.550, and I'm going to figure out that part of it. I'm going to do the same for each part of that, add them together, and I should get my overall grade. Does that make sense? Do any of you guys have problems that you brought? No. Do you have any questions on what I just sped through? Last time I went 10 minutes over. This time I'm short. And I cut out a ton of slides. But do any of you guys have any questions or anything that I went over, or anything that's kind of going through your brain that you're like, I don't even get what the rip she's talking about? So that's kind of a fast overview to give you kind of a refresher of things to look for. But I highly recommend that you go through the book and you look at those problems and work through them before you look at the answers, and then understand them and why you got that answer, Yeah.
Can I get that conversion chart off of Google? Is that really fun?
What's that?
The conversion chart for like Henry, can I find that on Google?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they set them up different. I just happen to like this one really good. And if you're going into nursing, you really want to know that. You're going to use it right away in dosage calc. So just give you the heads up on that right now. If you know how to do those back and forth, that's going to help you a lot. And long division, because that's going to be thrown at you that first day of dosage calc. You're like, oh.
Well, we've done stuff like point slope and all that.
What's that?
Point slope form and stuff like that with the graphs.
Yes, you could have that. And I tried to pull some of those, and I could not get them to get on my PowerPoint. I was like, man. And you're just looking at points. So if you're looking at X, Y, and you're looking at a graph, you're going to look at your 2 points that make that point. So you have your X and your Y, or your Y and your X. And those are just axis and atlas. And so you're just going to find those 2 points. And then, like, if it asks you, like, what's the slope, there's a slope formula. It's MD slope times, trying to think. Yeah, rise over run is, you can use that too. But yeah, there's an actual formula, and we actually have a formula. But honestly, let's see if there's.
Yeah, I was gonna say the book tells you kind of the breakdown of how many different questions from each level of math you get. So I don't think there's a lot.
There's not a lot of
algebra and graphing.
It's more the graphs that I see in here are more just interpretation, like understanding. I didn't see a whole. That's why I didn't. I thought of that because you might see that on your, like if you do Okay, like here, interpreting data. So if you look at page, I don't know if any of you guys have this, 85, and it just asks you to point the correlation, the coordinations of these points. And so that all that's telling you is whatever that your x, your y, your x and your y. So you're gonna go -2, you know, like if you looked at, okay, what point is E at? So I'm gonna go -2, and then I'm gonna go -3. Because x is this line and y is this line. So the first number of this, the first number in your parentheses is your x, and the second number is your y. And that's all I've seen for this. So I didn't see anything like understanding slopes or understanding rise over run, or understanding like there's lots to do with slopes. And you see that in college algebra. But I don't remember much of this. Like you might be able to have to find a point, and no x and y. So x is the first number, y is the second number, and you're simply just lining up. So if you remember x is the first number, y is the second number, that'll help you. But I didn't see any of this. I don't remember any of like what I had just took in college algebra. And so when I went and did this test, the most advanced I've seen on the TEAS test were polynomial means, and I don't find those anywhere in here. So and that's all just working with variables. And so if you know math, you should feel pretty comfortable doing this. But I think if you just make sure you go through this book, and don't freak yourself out, because it's not as hard as it might seem. But I would highly recommend percentages, because I know that they're in your real world problems, and to the best of what I can see in this book, they're doing a lot of real world problems. They want you to be able to understand, and that's really actually pretty good, because in nursing, that's a huge part of nursing is real world clinical thinking, clinical judgment. And if you're going into nursing, you're going to find that that's a skill you want, being able to correlate stuff from what your education is into putting it into your real world practices. And that's huge in nursing, and I don't know anything about OT, so I can't speak to that. But I know in being in the nursing program. So, any other questions? All right.
Thanks, honey. A couple things that I just wanted to point out with Honey's presentation, and you'll see Sherry's here in a little bit. Again, is meant to just be a quick overview of the types of questions that you're going to see on the test, so that you know what to focus your time on. If you want additional one-on-one help, the best thing to do is work through those problems, like she said, without looking up the answers or anything, and identify the problems that you got wrong. And if you're still not able to understand after reading through the rationales, take that into a tutor. And have them show you how to set up the problem, and then you guys can work through maybe some additional sample problems, or reference Khan Academy or other resources that she had in her PowerPoint. If you do need to find the tutoring schedule, we have copies in the TLC, but you can always find that most updated version on Inside NC on the landing page here. So for Ottawa tutoring, you can just click and it brings up the schedule. So if it's math, really any of our listed math tutors are going to be able to help you at the level that you're probably going to be seeing or studying for on the TEAS test. So we have somebody for math on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And if you need times outside of that, just let us know, and we're usually able to make arrangements with our tutors to cover by appointment as well. There's also an open online course that you can sign up for by, drawing there. You can sign up through our homepage here. You just go to programs, and then they're called MOOCs. You just click that, and then you fill out an information form. So what this allows you to do is select specifically math or reading, or if you're taking the TEAS for Surg Tech or OTA, and it includes the language, maybe the writing would be helpful as well. But you can sign up for these classes. They show up on your Inside NC under your courses, just like any registered course would, but it doesn't go on your transcript. You don't have to pay money for it. You don't get college credit for it. It's just designed as a prep course. So one nice thing about the MOOCs is when you sign up for it, it shows up under your My Courses. You go in there and they have pre-tests, and those pre-tests identify set areas that you can work on or you might need to work on. And then it has content and resources built into that course page, so it's self-guided study. So that might be another good place to go to identify what types of problems you're routinely needing to work on, because you don't want to spend a lot of time on stuff you already know. You want to spend time on the stuff that you need to improve. So, any questions about any of that?
You have to close it.
Yeah, I guess that would be good.
You're ready to close both.
There you go.
All right, I'm going home to study.
Good luck.
Yes.
Okay, lecture you guys on ethics, you study. Good luck.
Yes, I think it's that.
This one?
Yes.
222.
Can you just stand up and wake up? 2 hours so long.
Also, I noticed the number of people in here doesn't match up with people that signed in. So did somebody not sign in?
Okay. Hi, I'm Sherry. I teach English and reading here at EOSHA. I'm going to show you a little bit more about the study guide, go over the major points of what the test itself is testing you over. Typically, the reading part is easier, but this will give you kind of a primer about, okay, what is main idea, what is topic, what exactly are they looking for. It's not going to be new information for you, but part of doing well on a test is coming at the test with an understanding of, okay, I know that they're going to ask me about this topic, so therefore I understand what to look for. Okay, so the test makeup, again, some of this might be a repeat from what we said. For the reading and math, there are a total of 89 items, and these are the times. You'll have 64 minutes for the reading and 54 minutes for the math. Don't let that time concern you. I think that you will feel that if you just work diligently, problem through problem, I don't think the time limit is a huge issue for most people. If you think about it, a minute or so, even 30 seconds is a pretty long time span for a math question, as long as you know what they're looking for, and that's kind of the goal. You should be going in there saying, okay, this is a proportion question. I know how to do this, and that will cut down your time frame. That's why the studying is so important. You'll have 4 options for each question, and they are multiple choice, you know that. And some questions will not be scored, but you'll answer every question, and you won't know that. They just want you to know that. Those questions are put in there to improve the test for future years, or to notify problems or good questions. They're like test questions for the test makers. Okay, how do you prepare? Began yesterday. If you're taking it this fall or this spring, like in a few weeks or so, you need to be in this. You need to live and breathe the TEAS test as much as possible from this point onward. I suggest, an hour at least, probably at this point, maybe longer. And the best way to study is to not sit down for an hour. Sit down for 15 or 20-minute segments and focus on just a few items, because your brain does better in small segments of study rather than long terms. And we have a hard time now staying focused for that long because we're always on our phones and there's so many distractions in life. So get rid of your distractions, spend some time really studying and stay focused on this information. This right here is the #1 best resource for you. If you don't have this, and you're serious about doing well on this test, you really need to get this. Okay, I homeschooled my kids, and when I went through the ACT with the older ones, we read a source that actually was written by 2 teenagers that told people how they scored perfect scores on the ACT. And one of the tips that they said was, you always want to go to the closest resource of the test. Okay, these people made the TEAS, and so this is going to be the most reliable information for you. I know it's kind of expensive, you know, but sometimes you just got to make those sacrifices if you're really serious about doing well. Okay, this is going to be your best bet. The Series 5 one is good as far as you have extra practice tests to go through, but this is going to be the most up-to-date information about what you need to know. Version 5 has like a telephone book example. You don't have that in version 6, okay? Because apparently we don't need to know that anymore, right? Some of you may not have ever used a telephone book. Some of you are young enough to do that. You can also consult Google. Honey gave you the Union Test Prep site. Practice, practice, practice. One thing you can do if you do own this, you could make copies of this and take those tests according to the time that you are allotted and have somebody else grade it for you so that you don't see the answers and they can check what you've missed and then you can take the test again. Because part of doing well on a standardized test is knowing the time frame that you have. And really it's all kind of in the mechanics part of it, in actually the physical aspect of taking a test. The difference is you'll be on a computer and this is a book. And so I think you can make that jump okay. There are also online practice tests, but there's also a lot of junk online, okay? So make sure that the source that you're practicing from is from a decent source. ATI is good. Is it McDowell? What's the other publisher? Pearson is a publisher.
McGraw-Hill, I think.
Yeah, McGraw-Hill is a good source. So if you see those names attached to something online, those are legitimate sources. Don't take something written by somebody else who lives in a different country, okay? Because they really don't know what they're talking about. Okay, and it's out there, isn't it? Okay. Page 1 through 3 up here gives you some study prep guidelines on how to study and specifically explore this test, okay? So make sure you know those tips. And then the last 2 tips of reading the rationales for each question and then reading the explanation for each type of question, especially in the reading. I mean, math is, they're testing your math skills, you know that, okay? In reading, you need to know exactly what they're going for with the words that they use. And so in this book, before every type of question, okay, so like this one is summarize a complex text. It gives you like a little tutor session, okay? It teaches you what exactly they mean and what they're looking for, and they give you these practice problems, and we will hit some of these problems here in a minute. But make sure you understand this part. Don't just jump down to the practice question. Because even though you may get the question right, you need to really understand why they're asking that question. Because these questions, while they're helpful, they're different than the test. And the reason I know that is I helped to write the version 5. And what they did was they sent me an assignment and they said, okay, we need you to write how to summarize a complex text. And so I wrote this part, okay? And so then after and they divvied it out to all these people. And so after we had all finished this, they brought us in to the ATI testing center where all the people were. And they put us in a room and said, okay, now you need to create questions based on this. And so we would read this, and then we as a group would come up with questions. And we had all these rules. Test making is very secure and it's very measured, and there's certain things that you have to do to make questions. And so then we would all come up with these practice questions. And then from that, I don't know who did it, somebody created this book. Well, then they had another group of people actually compose the test questions themselves on the TEAS test. We didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what we were doing. We don't know if they took some of our questions. But then once they created the question, then it was moved on up to the next level, and they would go through and read each question and identify whether or not it was a good test question or a bad test question. And one of those stipulations was, we gave you 4 answers. 2 of them were clearly wrong, okay? But the other 2, we had to give the right one, and then we had to give a distractor that was very, very, not tricky, but close enough to trick somebody who really didn't know what they were doing, okay? And they were all, I mean, all the questions had to be the same length. They all had to look similar. And so there's a lot that goes into making these TEAS tests. So I say that because your TEAS test may end up looking different than the questions themselves, but these rationales and then the explanation of why the answer is correct is really important that you understand that, okay? And those explanation of questions are at the end. So like you take this practice test, and at the end of section 1, they give you the answers, and they say why A is right and why B, C, and D are wrong. Okay, so these questions are right too. Don't just say, oh, the answer was B, I got it right, great, next question. Make sure you know why you got it right, and you will know most of the reasons. But that's important that you at least read through that one time, okay? And then at the back of this book are the actual tests that look the same as the TEAS tests themselves, okay? And they also have the answers for them. I think there's 2 per section maybe, but those are at the back, the actual questions. So it goes reading, math, I think science, and then writing, and then at the very back is your whole practice test. So that's how you use this book. Sometimes it can be confusing when you miss certain things if you don't understand how to. Okay, the ATI testing company, again, is the best place to go for that. They have an online test. It's $88. It covers all 4 sections. Okay, so if you're only taking reading and math, it's not a great financial decision for you, but if you can afford it, go for it. It's going to look a lot like what you will do here on the computer. It will be on the computer. All of the questions you answer are scored, and then after you take it, very similar to the MOOCs. Again, MOOCs has nothing to do with TEAS. It's just another format of study. Okay, but they give you a score report that tells you where your weaknesses are and tells you, okay, you should focus here, here, and here based on how you answer these questions. Again, if this is your last chance at the TEAS and it's all or nothing, you might want to invest in that for your own sake. I personally have never done it, but that's the website, and it may be very helpful for you. Okay, in the reading, I'm going to skip this.
On that,
Yes.
with the testing, would you get to only take it one time, or would you be able to take it multiple?
See, I don't know that, so I think you can figure that out before you purchase. I know there are 2 separate tests, but yes, I think you should. That's a question for that website. Okay, I'm skipping this. Okay, lastly, the key terms in here are listed along the side. Again, I'm only talking about reading. I've not even looked at the others, but they'll have key terms over here. And the assumption is when you take the test, you know what these mean. So if you don't know what these mean, make sure you do know what these mean. Okay, so pay attention to that. And sometimes people get real scared about the TEAS and they talk about how hard it is. It's not a hard test, it's a complete test. And there are many assumptions built into it that they assume that you as a student at this stage in education, you should know this, okay? And so like with the math, they may give you an answer either maybe in decimal form, where the problem actually had it in fraction form, but your answer A, B, C, and D will be in decimal form. There's an assumption there that you know how to change it from fraction to decimal, okay? So that's why sometimes people think it may be tricky. It's just a complete test because it really tests your true knowledge, and it's a very short test. And so you have to pack all of that stuff in as well. So that's why you should really know. Okay, I said that. Okay, so the first section of the study guide is summarizing a complex text. Okay, so how do you do that? You check the topic. Sometimes the topic will be in the title. I would tell you most likely if they want you to give the topic of a paragraph, they probably won't give you the title. Okay, but that's typically the first place you go. A more reliable way is right here. Mentally circle similar words throughout the paragraph because a well-written paragraph will always refer back to the main idea. And so while it may say, okay, the fires in western Kansas might be in the topic sentence, it may refer back to the destruction or to the burning or to the, I don't know, whatever, disaster. Okay, all of those are similar words referring to that topic. So then you can say, okay, the topic of this passage is wildfires. Okay, but it didn't necessarily say wildfires. But that's how you find the topic. You circle the synonyms in the passage, and they should be all throughout, all the way down. I hope they would be on this test. Your topic is usually between 1 and 3 words. It's not topic sentence, it's just a topic. And you ask yourself, okay, what am I reading about? Again, you can find that by circling the questions. And then if it asks you the main idea is more than the topic. The main idea is, what is the author saying about that topic? So you take your topic, your one-word topic, fires, and you say, fires are spreading in western Kansas. So your main idea is, fires are spreading in western Kansas and it's destructive. And that's your main idea. So you kind of piece it all together. Again, all this information came out of here. Okay. And you can have this PowerPoint if you want it. The main idea is the work's specific message, and you ask yourself, what is important to me? What is the author saying about this passage? Supporting details, they always support the main idea or the major details, so you have major and minor details. And again, a well-written passage, you should be able to put the topic sentence and then all of the support beneath it. Okay? You may get a topic or a question that says, which one of these sentences is not a supporting detail of this passage, okay? Which one does not belong? It will be the one that, while it may mention fires, it won't be about how fires are destructive. It may be, there are 27 million house fires in the United States each year. Not 27 million, that's a lot. there are a lot of house fires in the United States each year. Okay, that's house fires, that's not wildfires, so therefore that one would not fit, and that's how you determine that. That's a lot of houses, sorry. My sister's house burned down, so I came up with that. Okay, so here's a practice problem. Choosing a hobby, and this is in here, has multiple positive effects on a person. One positive effect is the alleviation of stress. There is a chemical change that occurs in the body when a person engages in an entertaining endeavor. The second positive effect is the building of confidence. Practicing and engaging in a hobby allows a person to feel successful by being good at something. Usually, or ultimately, when one becomes successful, self-esteem increases. The third reason to choose a hobby is the opportunity to meet new, interesting people. Most hobbies have many people already taking part. It is easy, especially with social media, to find people with the same interests. Finding common ground will bring people together in diverse social formats and allow for stimulating engagement opportunities. These three positive results of getting a hobby should entice anyone to go and find something interesting to do. Okay, that's a perfect paragraph. Okay, so what's the one word? What's the one word topic?
Hobbies.
Hobbies. So you see how it's here and it's here, and it just kind of goes. You see it again here. Hobbies. Okay, so that's the idea of finding the topic. And what does the author say about hobbies? Here's your topic sentence. Choosing a hobby has positive effects. Okay, so then the question is going to be, which of the following titles, because you notice I didn't give you a title, best synthesizes the key ideas?
C.
Are you sure? It is B. C is too specific. Okay, so your general idea is going to be, or your main idea is going to be general. But do you see how these are all the same here? And see, this is very similar, or well, this is the exact format that you'll see on the test. And so the idea is to eliminate 2 immediately. And that goes for the math as well. So eliminate 2. And to me, this was easy because these are all very similar because they're very specific. Okay, but this one covers the general idea of finding a hobby. We go back, has positive effects. Okay. All right. And practice these. You can Google search these, how to find the main idea, and they'll give you paragraph after paragraph. But there's a lot of junk out there, so know that too. Okay. Which of the following is the topic? A. Okay, because it's right here. Choosing a hobby has multiple positive effects on a person. Let me check that. There might be positive effects. This is the answer. Okay, the answer is A. Yes, choosing a hobby. Okay, positive effects is going to be more of the main idea. Actually, positive effects of choosing a hobby would be the main idea. Choosing a hobby is your topic. Okay, inferring. Inferring means that it's not there in black and white. Okay, so you have to take what is written and answer the question, what is the author really saying? Okay. So you look for key terms that should lead you to a particular conclusion, and you ask yourself, what can I infer based on what I've just read? So you take fact, 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 and say, because of all these facts, this is what I can say about what the author is really saying, and we'll practice this. Every 2 weeks, when Ray arrives home, the first thing he does is put his bag of muddy, oily clothes on top of the industrial washing machine he and Lori purchased last year. Lori insisted they buy the wash machine so she could do his laundry separate from the family's daily wash. After he unpacks from his 2 weeks away, he showers in order to be refreshed for his family. Then he plays some games in the yard with the kids. Finally, the family goes to dinner so Lori does not have to make a dinner and do laundry. Okay, so which of the following is his job? Okay, he's a rig worker. It never said that he was a rig worker, right? But you took oily clothes, comes home occasionally, industrial washing machine, maybe helps with the kids if he's never there. Sorry, hide the bitterness. Okay, all right. Which of the following phrases helps the reader assemble the events in this passage? Okay, so which one of these gives you kind of an order of events? Which one of those phrases? Okay, the first thing. So the first thing he does is this. The second thing he does is this. And later on, we'll talk about sequence and ordering of passages. Okay, this is an open-ended question. I don't really understand why they put this in your study guide because there's no A, B, C, and D. But maybe they're wanting you to think about the passage as a whole so you could answer an A, B, C, D question. So what conclusions can be drawn about Ray and Lori's relationship? What would you say?
Would you go down to the question?
Yes. Sorry, I read it a few times, so I know it.
She supports her husband's job,
Okay.
and he supports her by, you know, taking her out to dinner so she doesn't have to do dinner and laundry right when he gets home.
Right. So supportive on both ends. Respectful. Okay. Okay. They hold traditional gender roles, so to speak. Good. And so that's kind of, you've inferred all of that because none of that you just said as far as being respectful. It doesn't say Ray and Lori have a respectful relationship, right? So that's the difference. You know that based on what you've read, not on what was said in there. When you have a question that's not an inference question, one of the most common mistakes is to infer the answer. And so if you know that it's not an inference question, make sure that your answer is black and white and that you can go right back up to the text and find it. That again, they will have that answer that's the knee-jerk reaction. That will be one of your distractors. So look out for those. Okay, topic, main idea, supporting details. Most of these reading questions are going to deal with this subject. This is basically what I spend the entire semester teaching. Okay, all right. What's the topic and what's the author's main idea about the topic? Preparing for this section, be able to identify the topic sentence in a paragraph. Okay, is it always the first sentence? No, most likely it won't be on a test because that's one of those complete knowledge questions. They'll say, okay, we're going to ask about the topic sentence, but we're going to put it in position 3 and see if they can find it. That's kind of, you can probably expect that. Okay. Most people think that the topic sentence of a paragraph is the first or second, but really it can be anywhere in that thing. A lot of times they stick it at the bottom. So you really have to take each sentence apart and determine, okay, is that a topic sentence? Is that a supporting detail? What is that? Okay, where is the one topic sentence that's most general about what this topic is about? Okay, and there's my equation. You take your topic plus what the author says about the topic, and then that becomes your main idea. But remember that your topic is general in nature. So it would be wildfires are dangerous. Okay, and then your main idea would be wildfires are dangerous in Kansas right now. Okay, so here's a practice problem. There is much more to training a horse than giving it a name. The most important element in training is time. A trainer must be prepared to spend time every day with the equine. Ground and body work must be implemented every session. The groundwork can consist of backing strategies, while the body work can include ropes routinely wrapping different parts of the horse's body. All in all, the name is important, but it is only the beginning. Okay, so the question is, what does the topic sentence imply? Okay, so these are open-ended. So first of all, where is that topic sentence? First of all, what's the topic?
Important element in training.
Okay, this is a detail. Do you know why? Because it's talking about one thing right here. Is the whole paragraph about time? No. Okay. So again, it's in position number 1. And see, that's one of my issues with this. They might put it in the practice in position 1, but on the test, it'll be in 2, 3, 4. I don't know that for a fact, but that's my suspicion. Okay. So while I tell you one thing, all of my examples, they're in the first position. Okay. So there's much more to training a horse than giving it a name. So we have training and we have horse, and we have training and we have trainer. We have equine. Is it equine or yeah, it's equine. Horse. Here's horse again. All in all, the name is important, but it's only the beginning. Okay. So our topic sentence is, well, there's much more to training a horse than giving it a name. Okay. I even forgot. So what does the topic sentence imply? Right, you don't just get the animal and name it. Okay, there's much more to doing that. Okay, so that's the implication of that. And how does the summary sentence support the topic sentence? Okay, your summary sentences will always be toward the end, if not the last sentence, right? Because that's what a summary sentence is. It goes back up and it refers to the topic sentence. Okay, so we still have the name, all in all, the name is important, but it is only the beginning. So what's our question? How does a summary sentence support the topic sentence? This might be a definition question. How is it supporting here? What's it doing?
It wraps up what it's summarized.
Right. It's summary. It refers back to the topic and the main idea, and it closes the paragraph. So basically, that question is wanting you to know what's the definition of a summary. Okay. All right. Reread the passage. We may not need to. Which of the following statements is a supporting detail? Now remember, details are specific in nature. Okay, so which one of these is a detail? I heard it. C. Okay, why? Because it's specifically talking about ground and body work. Okay, this is a general term, all in all. Much more. That's a general term. Okay, training a horse is time consuming. That's not as specific as this. Okay, so in this example, these are your two that you narrow it down to. Okay, but this is most specific. Okay, then we move on to following directions. Typically, it'll say, do this, 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 and this, and what should Johnny do next? And then you have to answer based on the directions it gave you. Okay, so you'll need to demonstrate the ability to follow directions by identifying important terms and recognizing the relationships. Okay, so this is a problem. We're not going to read it because we'll refer back to it. And that's another thing. In the reading, you don't always have to read the whole passage. And my strategy is I suggest that you skip to the questions and see what the questions want you to answer, and then go back up and find the answers. Okay, because this is a fairly long text, and there are other examples where the text is fairly long. And so if you skip ahead and say they're going to ask me A, B, C, and D, and then go back up and read the text, at least your brain is engaged in what you're looking for in that text. You may have to go back and find it again, but at least it's kind of a time-saving issue on these longer texts. Okay, so this is the writing process. Pre-write, draft, revise, edit, publish. Okay, so that's just an article you would read. Then it says, which of the following is not a step in the revision process? Okay, so then you're like, okay, here it is right here, read the revision. 4 components. It's the step that makes the writing beefy. First, the author must look at the draft and add information to clarify and enhance. Second, they must rearrange the text and the sequence. Third, the author must remove any necessary information. Fourth, the author must identify weak information or description. Okay, obviously I skimmed that. Okay, so which one of these is not a step? Did you say C? Do you know why C is not a step in the revision process? Because it's another step, it's not four. Okay, so that's the reason C is the answer in that case. Okay, all of those other ones were in the paragraph. Again, I pushed through that just as the example. Okay, and here's the order. Do you remember the order I just threw at you? Okay, yes, it is A. Now, at the test taking skill, it's say, okay, it's between pre-write and draft. So then you have to decide because these are all the same. Okay, so I know it's pre-writes first. And then all you have to do is determine which one of these is accurate. And then you have your answer. Okay, again, that's a test taking strategy that you could employ. Okay, identify specific information from a printed communication. These are memos, announcements, and advertisements. I always think these are easy. Again, the information is going to be right there. You don't have to infer. Here's a memo. I took it out of your book and I squished it up here, so I left the table out, but we don't need it for this question. Okay, it's a memo. It's from the superintendent to the teaching staff from the superintendent on this date about summer training offerings. School district is offering 3 summer training sessions for those interested in making extra money and experiencing breakthrough academic strategies. And they gave you a table. Okay, to register, click on the link and complete all the questions. Okay, accommodations, when making hotel reservations, please call this number and mention the school district. The stipend, please fill out the attached invoice and turn it to the office. Okay, so there's your memo. So here's the question. Which of the following describes how an attendee can get reservations in the correct hotel? Do you remember? Yeah, you call the number for accommodations. That's just an example of reading the memo. In version 5, it gives you a birthday invitation. What should you do if your name begins with G? You have to go back up and look where the G people go and what they do for the party or something. Okay. Identify information from a graphic representation of information. This is what Honey was talking about as far as the math, having that question about what's missing on this table, and the answer is a title. That to me is a reading question because there was no math involved. So, but you'll have these types of things in the reading section as well. And they won't ask you to do computations. They'll just ask you, do you understand what you're reading here on all of these? So which of the following statements is accurate based on the map? Okay, so here's our map, and we'll go back and answer the question. Okay. Park 3 is the southernmost. Define Park 3. Okay. A driver would take I-50 westbound to reach the parks. Park 1 has lakes on either side. And the drive from Park 2 to Park 3 is about 500 meters. So which one was correct? A. It's A. The 500 meters is, okay, here's our 500 meters. What did it say, 2 to 3? Yeah, so that's longer. First one is A because Park 3 is southernmost. Now, this looks very simple, and you think, well, I don't need to study that. You have to remember on maps, and they did it in version 5. You have to look at this. Because when we were doing a study session for version 5, we had the map question that was in my book. I couldn't get the stinking answer because I didn't look at this. Because they had turned it and they had put north over here where east is. And so I was looking at north, because that's what we always do, but they had changed that compass. Again, that's an example of a complete question. Because the assumption is that you know to go to the compass, and the knee-jerk reaction was on there as one of the options. I am not spatial whatsoever, and so it really bugged me that I missed that question. So when you have maps, pay attention to that, pay attention to this, okay? And pay attention to all of that if you need to for the question. Again, that's the skill of reading the map that they need you to know. If you know how to do that, that's fine, just remember those. Okay, so here's a diagram. Which of the following is indicated by this drawing? Okay, the nerve endings are part of the hypodermis. The epidermis includes the dermis. Hair follicles can be found in the dermis, or nerves exist only in the hypodermis. See, hair follicles in the dermis, right here. Okay. Again, that just takes a minute of reading the graph, making sure you understand what it looks like, and I can guarantee the knee-jerk answer will be one of your options. So, yes?
So they're gonna policeman's questions too?
This is technically a reading question because you don't have to know anything about the skin because all of your information is right here. That's the difference. While you may know that scientifically, they're testing on whether or not you can read the diagram based on how it's put out. That's why the math one is kind of similar to the reading as well. It's testing your knowledge of reading that. Now, in your science, they may ask you a question that is based on your scientific knowledge of the skin that may not be on here because they're testing that knowledge. But I also think the science part is really heavy on reading. I know the ACT was like that because when I was studying with my kids, I thought this is kind of more of a reading test than a science test. While the topic was scientific in nature, as far as the ACT was concerned, it didn't really require them to have scientific knowledge. They just kind of had to go back up in the passage and find what they were asking for. The TEAS is probably not like that. The TEAS probably assumes that you know certain basic facts in the area of science, and it's going to be in here. Okay. All right. There's a map. Okay, down here you may not be able to read it. Which of the following is the number of remaining territories in 1860? Okay, so you look over here. Here's the votes. I forgot what the answer was on this. Oh, here's your territories. Okay, so how many territories are left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that right? 8. That's a territory. Oh, 9. Is 9 up there? Is that no? Those are another northern. Oh, those are darker. Okay, so it's just these. So the answer would be 7. Okay, again, read the map. You can be guaranteed that the color differences on this will be very obvious on the computer screen. It won't be hard to distinguish. Okay, sequence means order. Okay, so sequential order, a fixed order in which there is a logical pattern, such as pages in a book or steps in a process. Okay, the difference between sequential and chronological is that chronological deals with time, how events happen in time. So here's an example of a problem like that. By the way, I'm giving you like one problem from these. There's typically 3 or 4 problems per section in the book. So the morning was senseless. First, I forgot to set my alarm clock, so I woke to the sound of the mail coming to the slot in my door. Instantly, I threw on some clothes and bolted for the car. I rarely have to hurry this fast, so I left without a cup of coffee. After what seemed like forever, I arrived at work and everyone was entering the front of the office building. Since this crazy experience, I have made it a point to set my alarm clock. Looking back, it wasn't mail coming through the slot in the door. Instead, it was a piece of, I think it was ice falling on the porch. So choose the statement that is out of sequence. Okay, which one's out of order and how it happened? And this is the hard question. Let me read it. Did they say the answer is C? And I don't think it's a very good question because it's like, are these all supposed to be in the order that it happened? So instantly I threw on clothes. So yeah, I guess it is. Instantly I woke up, instantly I threw on clothes. After what seemed like forever, I arrived. Since this crazy experience and looking back, do you see how these are similar? Okay, so the answer is C. That one is out of sequence because it goes after here, I guess, because it's after looking back. Anyway, that's a really bad example question. But the point is, when you get to one of those in your books, then read, what do they mean by that? Why did they choose that answer? The rationale then becomes more important than the question. Okay, so make sure you read those. Okay, which of the words or phrases from the passage indicates sequence? Again, sequence is orders in a step. So which one is a step word? First, okay. If it was chronologically, it would be the first time or some other time word. But those are called transitions. Apparently they're important. Okay. Fact, opinion, bias, stereotype. Fact, it can be based on real, it will be based on real, provable events. You can refer to textbooks or other nonfiction sources to get the same information from it. Opinions are different. Those are personal beliefs based on judgments. Okay, oftentimes an opinion piece will have emotionally charged words like horrible, terrible, terrifying. Those are all emotional words. The author's bias is evident through the tone. Okay, it won't be a neutral tone. It'll be positive or negative. Sometimes the authors will present an opinion and it'll sound like a fact. just based on the tone of the passage. And then oftentimes your opinions are mixed with facts. So you might have a question that will say, which one of these is a factual or an opinion, factual statement or an opinion, and then you choose. But remembering these four issues will help you in that determination. Okay, biases are a little different from opinion. Biases are kind of how you're made. They are opinions that affect a person's ability to make fair judgments. Okay, and so this person would say there is a need for stricter gun laws. Well, you could disagree with that person, but that's the bias. They're always going to lean that direction. Okay, biases you have like conservative, liberal, pro-choice, pro-life. You know biases. All of those that we fight about. Today it's men against women. No, that's a joke. You know what today is? It's the women don't go to work day that they're trying to let these men know that they can't make it without us. It's like, okay, just add one more divisive thing to our country. That's just so mean. Okay, stereotypes are oversimplifications, okay? Oversimplified opinions that do not account for individual differences. Places people and things into categories, such as all dogs are vicious. That's a stereotype, okay? All millennials are lazy. That's a stereotype. So look out for those. And they can be both negative or positive in nature. Point of view is where the author comes from. So always consider where the author is writing from. So you might have a passage that's written by a PhD in a certain subject area. So you know that his viewpoint is going to be more clinical than maybe a teacher or a parent. Okay, that's the point of view example. Which of these is a fact? Obesity is caused by inappropriate eating habits. Obese people do not have willpower. 1 in 3 adolescents is obese, or obese people just should lose weight. C, okay? A, B, and C are opinions that are written in factual form. Okay, that's what it means that slide ago that said sometimes opinions can be written as facts. So these sound like facts if you're not paying attention, but C is the correct answer. You can verify that. Okay, structure of text. What does that mean? Persuasive or the argument. The writer tries to convince the reader. They use strong opinion words. A problem solution essay is a persuasive essay. Expository, remember expository means explain, okay? So this conveys information and explains ideas. Cause and effect essays compare and contrast. And this book really didn't seem to major on that, but the other book, maybe they took it out. They would say, here's the passage. Is it persuasive? Is it problem solution? Is it compare contrast? Or is it cause effect? I'm not sure this one goes that far, but I know version 5 did. So you would have to determine which type of paragraph that is. And these two are difficult to determine between, but they would probably ask you that question. Okay, and a narrative is a story. So it's an account of events presented in chronological order. Okay, remember narrative deals with the story and time. So which one of these, which of the following identifies the mode of the following passage? So I'm going to click and we'll look at the passage. So we have expository, persuasive, narrative, and descriptive. And interestingly enough, your book doesn't even talk about descriptive, but the definition of descriptive is a piece of work that deals with the 5 senses of describing an object or an event. Okay? So expository, persuasive, narrative, or descriptive. Deborah, I just heard about the new executive opening. It seems a little unusual to add new people there, especially when some of the other departments need staff. All that to the side, I think you should consider Alex Jones from accounting. I think his skills are wasted at his current job. He would make an excellent manager. He's done everything we asked him to and more. Everyone down here likes him, and I can't imagine him doing anything to disappoint you, or the company for that matter. Just call him up for an interview, and I think you'll see what I mean. Also, we're getting Chinese food delivered later, so give your menu requests to Amy. Okay, so which type of passage is that? What's she saying, or what's Hal saying there? Yeah, I think you should, okay? That's persuasive. I think his skills. And he lays out why he thinks what he is. So hire this guy. Okay. And get some time good. Okay. Interpreting the meaning of words and phrases using context. Remember that every word has its meaning based on the context for the words around it. So they might give you an italicized word and say, what does this word mean? And you'll have to consider what it means above and below and where it appears in the passage. knowing definitions, knowing diverse meanings, knowing figurative, connotative word meaning. This is kind of fun in my reading classes because I have a lot of ESL students who don't speak English as their first language, and I'll just throw out a word and I'll say, what does this mean? And they never give me the right definition of what I'm looking for because I never give them the context. And so it's really not even fair for me to say, what does survey mean? Because they don't know. One of them said, well, that's what you take at the end of something to tell people how they did. Well, I was looking for the definition of, surveying the text, of looking over the text. Yeah. But I do it every semester just for fun of it because they never give me the right definition. It's really funny. Okay, so which of the following words from the sentence has a negative connotation? Again, this goes back into interpreting meanings of words. So which one's a negative word? Foolishness, right? Okay. Which of the following is the meaning of the word capital in the passage? So it's a fact that a large number of small businesses fail because the owner hasn't enough capital to tide him over slack periods and emergencies. That is, okay, this is the definition. It takes a certain amount of working money to keep a business going. Yes. Wait, no, D. That's why I pointed that out, because this is a structural, they put this in here on purpose. This is what's called a definition clue. That is, it takes a certain amount of working money, and it's right there. A certain amount of working money to keep a business going. This is a black and white definition of what does the word mean. Okay, it's right there. But B is the distractor. That B and D are the two that you narrow it down to. Okay, the denotative words, it just means that's the dictionary meaning. Okay, and it may just say what's the meaning of this word, and you pick the right definition. Okay, which of the following sets of guide words would appear at the top of a printed dictionary page containing the word aptitude? You guys still do dictionaries, right? You young people? The guide words are the two words at the top, okay? So where does aptitude belong? Right, in between these two. Okay, it's just an alphabetical order question. Okay, author's purpose. Okay, so you ask yourself, where does this text appear? Is it a novel? Then he wants to entertain you. Is it a newspaper? Then he possibly wants to inform you, or is it an editorial? He might want to persuade you. Okay. Is it in a magazine? Could be entertainment, could be information, could be persuasion based on the magazine. Okay, what's the structure? I just kind of told you all that. Narrative, informational, persuasive, and then what's the author's tone? Is it straightforward or emotionally charged? So they would give you the example in the version 5 one was something like, there was an accident on this road, the driver, comma, a new teenage boy of driving age, comma, cross over the line, yada, 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 yada. Well, you can see that the bias in that report was that the reason there was the accident was because it was a boy who was a new driver. And so that's kind of the questions. They're wanting you to say, what is this passage really saying? And what is he trying to do? Okay, let me see the question. Okay, here's an example. The rock star's appearance in town was brief, but certainly noticeable. She visited a local child care center early Tuesday and then spent the afternoon visiting with area business owners and community leaders. The superstar wrapped up her visit by attending a chamber dinner reception at which she spoke, and it's a really long article in the book. So what's the purpose of this text about the rock star visiting the town? What's the purpose? Yes, it's just information. There was no persuasion. We don't know the writer's opinion of that rock star. It really wasn't for entertainment. There wasn't much enjoyable in that article. So yeah, that's an example of determining the purpose. Point of view, you consider who the author is, again, if he's a PhD or if he's a student or a parent. Where does he come from? Who does he represent? What type of publication are you reading? Okay. My assumption is you guys do this anyway. Is it fact or opinion? What's the context of the written piece? Where does it appear? You are reading reference letters for a candidate seeking employment with your business. Based on what you know about the author's purpose, a reference letter from which of the following individuals is most likely to be accurate regarding the candidate's skills and ability to perform the job effectively? Who will you believe based on this guy you want to hire? A, look at his employer. Again, the distractors here would be probably between the volunteer and the employer. The volunteer, the guy, chooses to be there. The employer, who has to be there, has fewer choices. So the answer is A. Text features, headings and subheadings. This is pretty straightforward. Various text features like italics, underlines, bolds. Determine appropriate keywords for searching a text or set of text. So it would say, if you're looking for this and such, what word would you look for? Here's the example. Which of the following identifies why the following passage includes italics? Okay, do you know what italics do? Beyond that. Actually, bold emphasizes. Italics is, it's the computer version of underlining. You underline titles of works, right? And so underlining in italics is the same. So in his most recent work, Free Popcorn Under the Bleachers, Mr. Andrews offers readers a humorous account of his childhood, growing up as the youngest of 8 children. So what is this italicized piece? It's a title, okay. Those are kind of silly. I don't even know what other distractor answers I would add for that. It's a title, a book title, an article title, a movie title, whatever. Okay. Primary sources. Make sure in your book that you know the definitions of all the words that deal with primary sources. There's 3 or 4 that might be foreign to you that they will assume you know. Okay, like secondary source, and there's a couple more. So the primary source is a first-hand document or source created at the time in question. It's where you go back to. It's the closest piece of information to the event when it happened. For example, photo prints found in a museum or library, the originals, okay? Artifacts, ancient artwork, and diaries. All of these are original pieces. They are usually used to gain information about a specific time or place. And the key terms, again, are on page 39 to know. So which of the following of these answers is a primary source? B. Okay, again, from the very little bit of information I gave you on the previous slide, here's your two narrowed down answers. The difference is this is the actual diary, and this one are reprints of those diaries. So this one is primary, because it's the actual one. Okay, use evidence from text to make predictions and inferences, and draw conclusions about a piece of writing. Be able to successfully identify evidence from a text to support predictions, inferences, and conclusions. Predictions are the reader's guess to what is to come. Inferences are similar, but they are more subtle, and then you ask yourself, what is the author really saying? We kind of covered that. And then a conclusion is a summation of what happened and what may be to come. So this story is on page 41, but basically I narrowed it down. Consider reading a short story about 2 sisters separated when they were 12. Okay? So which of the following might indicate that the sisters were forced apart by poverty? A. Again, this is a poorly written question. You won't have a poorly written question on the TEAS test. It's poor because it uses the word forced in both the question and the answer. Okay? So it would be something different. But the story of this text is really long in the book, and the questions that follow deal with other aspects. So that's an idea of that skill. Okay, compare and contrast themes from print and other sources. Know the definition of a theme. Okay, so you'll be finding similarities and differences between themes, recognizing similar themes across cultures, and compare contrast a theme from one author or topic. Compare contrast themes across genres. Okay, so do you know what a theme is? It's an idea that runs through the whole work. Well, it may change or it may compare, for example, parenting in America as compared to parenting in Africa as compared to parenting in Mexico. Okay, that's kind of a theme. Or parenting is hard. Okay, here's why it's hard in America. Here's why it's hard here. Here's why it's hard here. But the theme is parenting is hard. Okay, so which of the following is true about themes? C. Yes, they reveal information about a culture or a time period. Okay, arguments and claims. Be able to identify the author's argument and supporting evidence. Examine the information that supports the argument to determine its relevance and sufficiency. And this page 45 is where this exists. I didn't include it because it's long. Evaluate and integrate data from multiple sources in various formats, including media, charts, diagrams, and graphs. Again, a chart is graphical representation, a diagram is symbolic representation, and a graph is mathematical representation. In your book, I think it gives you examples of line graphs. I remember the page, there's 3 or 4 different line graphs that you have to compare and answer questions about. And they won't be math numbers per se, they'll be more of a reading question. Be able to synthesize, organize, and analyze data from those sources. Okay, my final suggestions for you. Read the questions first and then read the passage. Some questions will not require you to read the entire passage. Again, read the questions first. Time yourself when you're taking those practice tests. Okay, make sure that your reading rate is high enough or slow enough for you to get all of the information. And then if you experience test anxiety, consider making copies of the practice tests and taking them more than once, okay, just so that your body gets used to the physical aspect of taking the test. Get there early, take a deep breath. If you really struggle, see if you can get into that room a day or so early and sit there and study in that room so that the environment isn't an issue for you. And then I think it says good luck. Okay, any questions?
Do they have the current TEAS study guide?
We do have it. I believe we do still have some in there. It looks like it.
Is that the one next door?
Yes. I don't know the cost. I'm thinking 50, 60.
And
Okay, 50.
on the test, is it more important to get as many questions as possible right, or to finish all the questions?
You want to get it, I think it's kind of the same because there are a specific number of questions. It's not like the ACT where they say, well, if you take this test, I think you want to get as many, you want to finish and you want to get everything that you did right. So yeah, I think it's kind of both.
Do they just divide your math and reading to get your score?
Do they do what?
They just divide your math and reading to get your score?
I don't know how they come up with your score, but I do think you can get the score the day you take it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, your score is printed out, so you'll know immediately. So I wouldn't worry about all of those statistics about the tests. I really think that if you feel comfortable with this book in and of itself, I really think you're okay. Because honestly, it's high school information. When you graduate from high school, all of this, you should know this. But I know that the high school was a long time ago for a lot of us. And so you have to go back and remind yourself of all this information. I don't think the TEAS test is as hard as the ACT test. My opinion. Any other questions? All right, take advantage of the tutoring. Get rid of Facebook until you take the test. Stay off the social media.
Which one is able to